next presentation around developing high potential leaders in the context of healthcare. I'm very excited to introduce our next two speakers, David Huff and Jennifer Hunt. David Huff is the Chief Operating Officer of Easy Consult. David leads organization transformation projects in both the public and private sectors. These large-scale interventions often combine the Burke products with other assessments. David spent 17 years at Anheuser-Busch Companies, Inc. as a Director of International HR, a Director of HR Development and Selection, and a Manager of Management Development and Training, as well as an OD consultant. He has held corporate positions such as the Vice President of Human Resources for Dimension Data, Inc., or DDI, Director and Managing Director for International Human Resources for Proxicom, and he has also been working for over 5 years as an external consultant with OSF Healthcare on their HIPO program, as well as other aspects of learning agility. His co-presenter, Jennifer Hunt, is actually the Director of Physician Leadership Academy for OSF Healthcare. She serves as Director of the Dr. Gerald J. McShane Physician Leadership Academy for OSF in Peoria, Illinois. Jennifer has over 20 years of experience in education and leadership roles. She joined OSF Healthcare in 2011, and she is accountable for the development, implementation, and evaluation of OSF multi-specialty services learning programs that develop their physician leadership skills and talent. Her work for OSF Healthcare Systems Executive Leadership Development and Succession Program has awarded her the 2019 Excellence in External Partnership by the Association of International Management Consultants. Jennifer has a master's in business administration from Bradley University, and she has co-facilitated the Transformational Leadership Program with Easy Consult since its inception. It is now my great honor to hand over control to David and Jennifer so that they can share with us this case study on high potential leadership development in the physician area for OSF Healthcare.
Thank you, Tanisha. Pleasure to be here with you this morning. Before we dive into the Transformational Leadership Program, I thought it would be important to have Jennifer spend a minute just giving you an introduction to OSF Healthcare. Jennifer?
Good morning. Thank you, Dave. So to tell you a little bit about OSF Healthcare and our partnership with Easy Consult, OSF Healthcare is a faith-based organization. We're actually owned and operated by the Sisters of the Third Order of St. Francis, and we're located in Peoria, Illinois. We're a large healthcare system. We have approximately a little over 23,000 mission partners or employees. They're mission partners to us because our mission really is to serve in the spirit of Christ, in the example of St. Francis of Assisi, and serve with the greatest care and love in all that we do. And we began this work with Easy Consult about 5 years ago, as was shared here, as we started our time together. And this partnership has been a great one that has helped us to continue to grow our high potential talent and our high potential talent at all levels of the organization, particularly in physician leadership, and that continues today. We really started with the acceleration of development, and I think that's positioned us very well as an organization to be very agile as we've all navigated the times of COVID that we've seen in the past 6 months. But it's allowed us to be not only learning agile, but also flexible and continue to push forward as we continue to experiment with making sure that our talent is in place to continue to lead and really, as we all know, the unknown that we see. And so as Dave shares with you here this morning, he's going to talk a lot about the 4-day program that's part of the larger context of the work that we've done to develop the high potential talent at OSF Healthcare. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I look forward to sharing some more about the journey that happens after we really start with the learning that first starts to concentrate on learning agility, competency, and leadership styles further. Dave?
Yep, thanks, Jen. Next slide. So as Jennifer highlighted, the program on transformational leadership focuses on 4 areas: learning agility, organizational climate, transformational competencies, and leadership style. And I'm going to touch on the three lower circles briefly and put more emphasis on the top circle on learning agility. So next slide. I'm not going to go through all of these objectives, but understand that there are one each for each of those four areas. And then the final bullet there is how do you put these together and be an intentional transformational leader. So next slide. So what is learning agility? I was listening to the presentations yesterday and the term agility came up and I hear agility being used in a lot of different contexts. So I thought it would be important for us to tell you what our definition of learning agility is. Next slide. Okay. By the end of the session on learning agility, you'll be able to understand what the definition of learning agility is, be able to understand the difference between agility and ability, understand the role that skill and motivation play in learning agility, the importance of speed and flexibility, which are two of the 9 dimensions in learning agility, what the definition of the 9 dimensions are, and give you a sense for one of the products used to measure learning agility. In the case of OSF, it's the Burke 360 Learning Agility Survey. Next slide. Okay, in this deeper dive into learning agility, there are 3 parts. I'm going to define learning agility, I'm going to talk about the research behind it, and I'm going to give you a high-level sense for the assessment and what people receive in the way of feedback. Next slide. So the definition that I use when someone asks me is learning agility is finding yourself in a situation where you've never been before, you don't know what to do, and you figure it out. Pretty simple. As I've been listening to the presentations the last 2 days, I think there's been a lot of opportunities to demonstrate learning agility in the challenges that have been faced in the healthcare industry with COVID. Next slide. So if that's the definition of learning agility, why would learning agility be important? Next. Because people who are more learning agile have a broader repertoire of things that they say and do that helps them be more effective in more situations more often. And to be provocative with a group, I would say to them, if that's not important, then learning agility wouldn't be important. And I haven't had a group say to me yet that wouldn't be important in their organization. Next. So it doesn't mean that people don't fail. They do, but then it's a question of what do they do then? Next. It doesn't mean that occasionally they don't look awkward, stupid, foolish, but that's part of learning agility, is pushing yourself and into an uncomfortable situation. And when you do something early on, you're not going to do it swimmingly. So, but you're willing to do it, and then it's a question of then what do you do? Next slide. Okay, one of the dimensions of learning agility that I'm going to talk about in a minute is flexibility. So I'm going to demonstrate flexibility. I was planning to show about a 2-minute clip that would give you a sense for what learning agility looked like. Based on what I heard yesterday and today, I don't want to spend 2 minutes of our time doing that. You know what learning agility looks like. You've been facing it every day for the last several months. Next slide.
Now to.
Okay, so the next question that I typically ask when I'm talking about learning agility is the smartest person in the room the most learning agile? And typically people, their inclination is this a trick question? And it's not. And the answer is not necessarily. Okay, next slide. So the difference between ability and agility, learning ability or cognitive ability or intellectual horsepower is the capacity to reason and comprehend our surroundings. Learning agility is the energy or power of moving quickly and flexibly through both known and unknown situations. So in order to be learning agile, you need both. You need ability, that at the bottom of that circle there, intellectual horsepower. But once you reach a certain threshold, and all of us in this session have that capability, it's learning agility is what happens above and beyond when you've reached that threshold. So there's a difference between the two. Next slide. So if we were looking at a group of learning agile individuals, what would we see? Well, those people seek challenges and opportunities for growth. Next, they're open to new experiences. Next, they process experiences in order to learn. They introduce new ideas and question norms. They remain present in challenging situations by performing and adapting on the fly. They understand that experience alone doesn't guarantee learning. So just because I put you in a situation doesn't mean that you learned anything if you can't tell me what you learned. And they take time to reflect, seeking to understand why things happen in addition to what happened. Okay? So that's the first part on learning agility is what is it? And how is our measure of learning agility, or the measure that we use in the OSF program, different than other measures of learning agility that are out there. And ours is based on theory and it's based on research. The name of the tool we use to assess learning agility is the Burke Learning Agility Survey. Burke is an actual person. He's a professor of organizational psychology at Columbia University. And when he decided that he was going to go out and try and measure this thing called learning agility, as a good researcher, he went to the literature. The most comprehensive work that had been done was by a group at the University of Michigan, DeRue, Ashford, and Myers. And they said learning agility is about two things: speed and flexibility. So when Burke and his doctoral students studied this subject, they confirmed that, but they said, hey, wait a second, there's 7 other things that are also part of this concept called learning agility. So we say that Burke and his people added conceptual clarity, which led to the 9 dimensions of learning agility. Next slide. So back to the theory by DeRue and his colleagues at the University of Michigan. One question is, well, does learning agility just kind of happen in and of itself? And the answer is no. There are certain individual differences that we all bring into a learning situation. And so the psychologists call those antecedents. I call those individual differences. You could say it's somebody's personality, how introverted somebody is, how extroverted, how goal-directed they are. So you have to give consideration to our individual differences. Then next, there's the opportunity to demonstrate next learning agility. And the drivers of learning agility, as I said a minute ago, are flexibility and speed. So, but there's another piece that's really important to understanding learning agility next, and that is context. And I say context matters. Tanisha indicated in the introduction that I worked at Anheuser-Busch for a number of years, and I found myself in situations with the CEO there, and I heard him pound the desk and talk about the importance of innovation in the organization and how he wanted a lot of innovation. And then 5 minutes later, I heard him talking about not wanting senior people to make mistakes. And guess what? He didn't get a lot of innovation. So the context that an organization creates has a lot to do with how much learning agility is really going to get demonstrated. So next slide. Burke and his doctoral students also identified two other areas that they felt they needed to call out that kind of wraps around learning agility. And those two areas are skill and motivation. So next slide, skill. Skill is a person's proficiency, their baseline, their starting point. This person might be a scratch golfer and I'm a 20 handicap. It's not saying that I'm good or bad or vice versa. It's just that's where I'm starting. So if you think about skill in a learning agility context, it's how good are you at assessing a situation or a set of circumstances? And then can you transfer that learning to a new or different situation? And if you can't, then what do you do? And next slide. Then the other issue is motivation, and it's your level of learning energy. So how willing are you to take risks when you don't know what to do? And the next question is, how important is it to you? And learning agility is not important to everyone, but it has to be a consideration when we're talking about learning agility. Next slide. Okay, so as I said, there are 9 dimensions that are measured in the Burke that we talk about in the transformational program. First one is flexibility, being open to new ideas and proposing new solutions. Speed, acting on ideas quickly so that those that aren't working are discarded and other possibilities are accelerated. Experimenting, trying out new behaviors to determine what's effective. Performance risk-taking, seeking new activities or opportunities to be challenged. Interpersonal risk-taking, discussing differences with others in ways that lead to learning and change. Collaborating, finding ways to work with others that generate unique opportunities for learning. Information gathering, using various methods to remain current in one's area of expertise. Feedback seeking, asking others for feedback on one's ideas and overall performance. And finally, reflecting, slowing down to evaluate one's own performance in order to be more effective. So in terms of the assessment itself, next slide, there are 38 questions, 5 questions for flexibility and speed, and 4 questions for each of the other dimensions. The version that we use with OSF is the 360 or multi-rater survey. There you can create 5 different categories. One is typically the self, a second is typically the supervisor, a third is typically direct reports, and then it can be peers, customers, really up to what the organization is trying to accomplish with this. So next slide. At the highest level, what people see is, I call it a spider diagram. In the blue, it's the person that's rated themselves, and you can see they've rated themselves pretty high. They think that they're pretty learning agile. And then what you see in the orange is the combination of all the other perspectives. So if we're working with this individual, we have to try and understand why those differences exist. Next slide. So then what we do is we come down a level. So I mentioned there's 9 dimensions. So they begin to get feedback for each of the 9, in this case, performance risk-taking, interpersonal risk-taking, and then you see the different perspectives, the supervisor, the direct reports, et cetera, et cetera. Then next slide, we go down another level. So we said there's 38 items. 5 for flexibility, 5 for speed. So they then get a deeper, more intimate look at by each of the 38 items on the assessment. Next slide. And then finally, there's also, in addition to the quantitative information, there's qualitative information. And people really value, it gives greater fidelity to the things that they're seeing in the numbers. So that's really what we talk about in terms of learning agility. Next slide. So the second area of the 4, and I'm going to be hitting these at a very high level, is organizational climate. And the way we're defining that is how it feels to work for a specific leader at a specific point in time. Now, there are 6 dimensions that we measure with this organizational climate questionnaire, and those dimensions are flexibility, responsibility, standards, rewards, clarity, and team commitment. Again, people get feedback, and here, this is an example of the climate that this particular manager creates, and small circles is good, green is good, red's an area to pay attention to that they would need to work on. So they get information on the climate that they create, the climate that they experience from their boss. Next slide. And then they're able to drill down, because a lot of times they'll say, well, does everyone feel like there's an issue with flexibility? And in this example, the scores are pretty close. If you look down to bureaucracy-minded, many of the scores are in that middle area, and there's one outlier. So again, people get high-level information, lower-level information. Next slide. So that's what we talk about in terms of organizational climate. The third area is leadership style. Next slide. We talk about 6 different leadership styles. The directive style. Now, I was really struck by it. I'll come back in a second and connect this to some of the stuff that Kathy spoke about earlier. So we talk about 6: directive, meaning immediate compliance; visionary, providing long-term direction and context; gaining buy-in and support; affiliative, creating trust and harmony; participative, building consensus and commitment and generating new ideas; pace setting, accomplishing tasks to a high standard of excellence; and coaching the long-term professional development of employees. So people get feedback. Again, here's how I think I manage as a leader, and how do my people experience me as a leader? And you can see the light bars and the blue bars, so people can say, I thought I was being pretty visionary at the 91st percentile. My people say, no, not so much. We see you as being much more affiliative in your relationship with us. Next slide. But again, similar to organizational climate, you can bring that down so that people can look style by style and what the distribution is of the people that rated them. Next slide. So the fourth area is the OSF competencies. When we started this process, OSF used a longer, broader set of competencies as part of their performance management system. My advice to them is it was too many. Let's cut it down. Let's focus on the ones that really support transformation. And so we ended up with 8: fostering innovation, fostering organizational learning, translating strategy into superior executive and integrate, driving performance improvement, fostering teamwork and collaboration, coaching for performance, developing talent for competence, capacity, and change, and championing change. Next slide. Okay, so they got, this is another 360 tool that we use in the program, similar to what you saw with learning agility. At the highest level, it's here's how I think, the competencies I think I demonstrate, and here's the competencies that my people experience me demonstrating, or all other perspectives. So it's direct reports, peers, and supervisor. Next slide. And here we bring the perspective down a level. So now you're getting feedback by competency, by perspective. Next slide. Okay, so throughout this process, and what I've just taken you through is about 2 days in the 4-day program. And we talk about people being able to get information about themselves in 3 different ways. Self-report, I ask you, what's your leadership style? What learning agility dimensions do you demonstrate? The upside of that is you know yourself pretty well. The downside is we all have blinders. A second way to get feedback is through observing someone's behavior. You could follow them around all day and write down everything that they did. So you're capturing what they're doing. That's the upside. It's objective in that sense. The downside is you don't know what's going on between someone's ears. That's the part that's missing. And so with each of these assessment questionnaires that we use in this program, it's providing feedback and assuming that you're using good tools that are validated and reliable and so on and so forth, you're getting a pretty good look. But at the end of the day, what you want to do is try and get convergence of these three different sources of input. Next slide. So what we do is a couple of different things to help people integrate these 4 content areas. We hold individual consultation sessions. There are 2 facilitators in this program. It's typically been Jennifer and myself, and we have one-on-one meetings, 20-minute meetings with each of the participants. So now we're into days 3 and 4, and we're trying to juggle these individual meetings with people also having meaningful things to do while these one-on-one things are happening. We ask people, we say, it's your session, it's your time. We don't have anything additional to present. You've got to tell us where you are with this information, what's still not making sense, and the objective being to get to a point where you have something that you're going to work on once you leave after the 4-day session. Next slide. Somehow the slides are out of sequence. Back up to the, okay. The other thing that we do is there is, we call it an integration exercise. It's something called the decision game. At the end of day 2, we ask for volunteers. We have the opportunity for 5 or 6 people to be leaders of this exercise. We do a briefing with them. We ask them to select their teams from the people in the rest of the group. Then the next day we come in and we conduct the exercise is called the decision game. And they've got to build 3 different products, and there's a whole sequence of things that they've got to do. And there's they have to buy materials and they have to sell products, and there's profit and loss. And then we say, okay, let's talk about all this. And given the 4 areas that we focused on in the session, what leadership style did you think you used? And we asked the leaders to do that by themselves We ask their teams to do that same kind of assessment. Then they come together. And so what styles were used, what climate was created, what learning agility dimensions could have been used, what competencies were demonstrated. And we start with the people that, the teams that were less successful up to the ones that were the most successful, as measured by, did they achieve the objective, which is to make as much money as you can. And it really helps make this come alive for people. And so we're doing that exercise, these individual consultations, and then we end with people setting goals that they're going to accomplish, and then there's the experience that people have after the program. And I'm going to turn that over to Jennifer.
Okay, so as Dave was just sharing, the competency, we have our OSF competencies. The core competency of developing this high potential talent pool is really adaptive leadership. And so the experience that all of the learners are going through as they go through the decision game and the individual consultation is really practicing adaptive leadership in action. So they have the opportunity to put everything together as they form those teams to make it competitive, make it outside maybe the sphere of what they do every day, but to really drive home how you use all of the core learning that they've gone through in that 4-day workshop experience. And so as Dave was sharing, it doesn't end after that. So if we could go to the next slide, I want to share a little bit about what happens after. And so this is really around developing this high potential talent pool. And it might be helpful to also know maybe the N that exists within the number that attend this learning. And as it is to develop high potential and take a look at the talent, it is a small number. So it's a cohort-based learning, and typically the learning is, we usually have approximately 20 to 25 learners and leaders that are part of this. And it is really from all disciplines within the organization, including our physicians and advanced practice providers. So this is done each year, and the cohort starts and begins with the workshop experience, as Dave has shared, and then they continue on that learning journey every quarter. And so the goal that is set through those individual consultations between myself and Dave, and the partnership with being able to tailor this learning has been tremendous, because it really fits for OSF Healthcare in our organization. That's also combined with peer coaching. So as we know, resources within most organizations that can be scarce sometimes, or may just not have enough to spread around for everything. And so we combine peer coaching, because we know that oftentimes we learn by helping someone else. We know the material, and we learn by helping someone else learn that material as well. And so we have this cohort learners actually form peer coaching triads, and they continue that throughout their year of ongoing learning as they come together each quarter. And this originally was designed as in-person learning. Over the past 8 or 9 months, it's had to be a combination of virtual learning as well. And so we're experimenting with that, figuring that out to see how that continues to work in the future. But it really is designed to be that face-to-face. And so our hope is that in the future we'll be able to go back to offering that. But the in virtual, as we are able to do even this meeting here today, seems to serve as well to help to keep the group connected. And then the final thing I'll add that I think is critical to this learning has been really the leaders giving back and serving as future mentors. So a part of the design, the larger design, is that we continue to engage those leaders to help develop the next level of talent within the organization and serve their peers. And so they continue to serve as future mentors ongoing. And as we've shared with the Transformational Leadership Program, this is just one of a larger scale learning that sits within executive leadership development succession within our organization itself. But really is the heart and the core of the learning from that standpoint. So if I could move to the next slide, I'll share a little bit about some of the results that we've seen. And I realize that these are from 2018, but these give an idea of a flavor, and this trend has continued. So one of the things that's being worked on now is doing some remeasurement, but this gives you an idea as we were taking a look at the data from 2018 around our retention rate that we've had. And at the time that we measured this, it was 95% of those that have gone through this learning program as transformational leaders were still within the organization. And 20% of our leaders that participate in this are physicians. So that's a significant number, and that continues to grow as well, even in the space that I'm in, focused even more on the core of growing physician talent. And you'll see the placements here as well. And the interesting thing around these internal promotions or placements since going through this experience is that the entire senior leadership team that I currently work with now in my role are graduates of the Transformational Leadership Learning and experience and continue to give back. And so all of them are included in this number too that you'll see in the internal promotions and placements. And that continues to be the talent pool that's really looked at to continue to grow our organization as new roles come up and new roles that we may not even know existed. We've all seen that in the market, in the industry, in the past 6 months. We have brand new roles. And I think, again, as I started and shared a little bit about the case study that we're talking about here with transformational leadership and our work at OSF Healthcare has been, began in 2015 and really, I think, positioned the organization to be ready to fill maybe some of those new talent gaps that we're seeing around skills that were needed, being able to really use the competencies that have been developed, take a look at knowing this is the climate that I need to create as a leader, this is the leadership style that I need to use in this particular situation, and really drive us as we've experienced a lot of changes with COVID over the past 6 months. And I've really seen, it's interesting, the leaders that I've talked to have even for themselves been able to say, I had to use my directive leadership style in this particular situation. And I think we've seen a lot of that with COVID. Directive, I always share with them, remember, that is not a bad thing. Sometimes that particular leadership style it is one that might be seen as negative, and so we try hard in the learning to say, there's a time and place for every leadership style. They're not good or bad. It's really, do you use that particular leadership style in the right way at the right time? And there's a time and place for every single one. So it's been a joy to watch these leaders grow and really use the skills that they've learned and be able to adapt in the environment that they've seen themselves in. And I think that's been a huge blessing from our standpoint as an organization. And they continue to experiment with learning more about themselves as they continue to give back as mentors. So if I can move to the next slide, I'll share a little bit about some of the anecdotal feedback that we've also received. I think this just shows the benefit of what the leaders have received out of this learning in particular. And you'll see two here, one from Lynn Fulton, one from Steve Wagner, and both of them have been graduates of the program. They continue to serve the organization in the roles that they're in. But I think, sometimes as someone that helps to facilitate learning and design learning, you often don't see sometimes the fruits of that work until later on. So it's nice to receive some of the feedback from the leaders that have experienced that to see how it's helping to benefit them. And one of the things that Steve shares is that, it's really around the networking that's been offered. And that's a large component of this. It's the connection to the organization and the connection to each other as well, and really focusing on them as individuals and being intentional about doing so as they go through their learning process. The final slide that I'll share with you, if we can move to the last slide here, is, and I think at the beginning we might have said 2019 for the recognition. It was actually 2018, so my apology for that. But it was 2018 that this work received recognition for the partnership between OSF Healthcare and Easy Consult. And it's always nice to receive that recognition, but I think it is rewarding as someone that helps to design learning and help an organization grow and be better, and to really to help to align talent, that's recognized outside of the organization as well. And so we were humbled to receive this award, and it was a joy to receive this award, and in partnership with Dave and the work that he's helped us to do to really tailor the learning specific to our organization, so that it met our need and the need of our leaders, and continues to do so today. So I think with that, Dave, any further comments to wrap up what we've shared today around our case study, or we can open it up to questions?
I have nothing to add, but willing to entertain any questions.
Thank you very much, David and Jen. We will see if any questions come in through either our Q&A or our chat. We encourage you to look for Easy Consult's social media and webpage for more information on how they can assist you with creating and engaging an effective leadership development, high potential assessment and development process. And again, we thank our speakers, David Hoff and Jen Hunt, for their presentation today.